Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for the summer quarterly meeting for the Northern Bus Garage Reconstruction Project Community Update. As always, next slide. This meeting will be, next slide. This meeting will be both virtual and in person. Next slide. So for those who are virtual, we ask you to, if you have a question you would like to ask, please use the chat function and you can ask your question at any time. We will have allotted portions for the Q&A to be answered. So if you could put your questions in the chat. Also, if you would like to ask your question directly, you can simply raise your hand. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see the reactions. When you click on reactions, you'll see the raise hand, and we will make sure to unmute you and allow you to ask your questions. Next slide. For those in the room, of course, when we get to the Q&A, if you raise your hand, we'll be sure to get you the mic. So for today's meeting, we will be going through introductions, project overview and updates. We also know there were questions regarding the location within the building of the Metro Transit Police Department. So we have some information for that. Also, we have representatives to answer any additional questions beyond the project. We'll be covering the environmental management update, the zero emission bus program update, and then what to expect for the remainder of 2023. Next slide. With that, I'll turn it over to Maya to do introductions.
Thank you, Denzel. Good evening, Northern Bus community members. We are excited here to bring you the latest updates from the last quarter on our project. My name is Maya Nino. I'm a senior program manager with Capital Delivery with WMATA. To my right is Miss Amy Masdrobian. She's WMATA's director of the Zero Emission Vehicle Group. To her right is Mr. Phil Sheraton. He is a project executive with Clark Construction. To his right is Captain Maurice McKinney. He's with Metro Transit Police Department. And to his right is Mr. Jim Ash. He's WMATA's Director of Civil and Environmental. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Sheraton for project overview and construction updates.
Thank you, Maya. Next slide, please. So just a couple new items tonight that we'll cover. One of them is some of our housekeeping best practices. Erosion and sedimentation control, these are the measures that are guided by DEOE for active construction sites. All of these measures are regularly maintained. They're inspected weekly, and they are also required to be inspected after each storm event, such as the nice rainstorm we had earlier this evening. We are doing street sweeping when we have major trucking operations ongoing from the job site. We have two different companies providing street sweepers, and on occasion, Clark will bring in a company-owned one as well to supplement that. We do have the ability now with DC Water finally providing the meters to also add direct washing of construction vehicle wheels when the site is particularly muddy. And often we suspend hauling on, tomorrow we won't have hauling because of the rain that happened here and at our dump sites. We also have maintaining a DEOE compliant dust management program associated with our demolition activities. That's generally in the form of hoses and wetting or misting. We make sure we segregate the food waste throughout the job site and put that in dedicated trash receptacle in a closed top dumpster to help minimize the potential for vermin. And each work crew is required to provide a daily cleanup of their work area. From the standpoint of that pest management, we've had a pest control subcontractor on board with the team. They are regularly monitoring the program, and they currently have bait stations set at a 50-foot on center around the perimeter of our project, or a total of 51 bait stations that are active and managed, again, to help protect the movement of vermin. The next slide, please. So here's a couple of images of some of the street sweeping and dust control. You can see up in the top right, we have a broom associated with a bobcat. You can see one of the street sweepers passing by our gate on Buchanan on center right. You can see some wheel washing for a concrete truck on bottom right. Up in the top center, you see what's called a water buffalo, and that is dispersing water out of a 500-gallon tote tank through a sprayer bar on our internal haul roads to help minimize dust. The bottom on the far left side, in the left and the left center, you can see some of the demolition activities, and you can see the craft persons that are manning the fire hoses that are providing wetting operations around that. So we continue to do the street sweeping, water applications on our interior haul roads, wheel washing as warranted, and then if you can see in the foreground in the top center, you can see a lot of stone on the ground, and that was underneath our slab on grade, and we try and leave that as long as possible to help, again, limit the dirt type dust. And we've also left as much of our concrete slab in to do our processing to reduce mud tracking. Next slide. So general construction progress since the last meeting. From in quarter two, we finished up the asbestos abatement inside of the building. This was for a very limited amount of mastics associated with floor tiles. That was all done under a DEOE supervision and with a city licensed asbestos mitigation firm. And we continue to manage all of our excavated soils per the DEOE and the district regulations. Relative to the ongoing monitoring, we have supplemented the previous surface-based monitoring with air and noise and vibration with in-ground monitoring program as we prepared for the start of excavation activities. That included inclinometers, which measure the ground movement, potential for ground movement as we excavate the deep holes. We have observation wells that allow us to understand if the groundwater level is fluctuating around the project as a result of our excavation. And then we have a number of utility monitoring points and ground monitoring points on some of the sensitive utilities and surfaces that surround our job site. You can see them installing a utility monitoring point on the right, and then the typical cover that we put over our instruments inside the work zone. There are a few of these out in the street on a couple critical utilities, but the vast majority of these instruments are all inside of our fence. Next slide. Mass demolition is nearing completion. The bulk demolition of the historic car barn was completed in the last period. We are taking, on the top picture there, you can perhaps make out a few long rectangular troughs running into the page, and those were some historic trolley pits that were discovered underneath the floor slab as we did the demolition up behind the administration building. These were documented before they were removed in coordination with the folks over at the Historic Preservation Committee inside the district. And then there's a hand separation that we had to do with the historic facade. That was to minimize vibration and potential damage. And we continue to process all of our demolition debris, with the vast majority being recycled. And, you know, we're proud to report that right now we've continued to divert over 95% of the demolition waste from landfill for recycling, reuse. Next slide. Supportive excavation, this is the process that we have to put structures in the ground to allow us to safely excavate. In the bottom right, you can see some of that. This is a slide from the corner of Iowa and Arkansas looking west back towards the backside of the administration building. And you can see the steel piles in the timber, and you can see some wires sticking out of the wall there. Those are called tiebacks, and those help us resist the forces from the soil wanting to push into the site. We did complete all of the drilling of SOE pile around the area where we are excavating below the adjacent existing grade. We are ongoing with the installation of lagging and tiebacks as that excavation progresses. We also completed all the piles for the large tanks and structures that we'll be building under the building inside for stormwater management and the bus water recirculation. You can see some of those piles sticking out of the ground in the top right picture. And the mass excavation, as you can see from that bottom right, is well underway as we've started to dig the hole that will create the basement for bus storage in the future. Next slide. And the deep foundations, these are the first of our new permanent work elements that have been constructed. We did mobilize in July for these operations. The large red beam with the name Michaels on it there, that's our subcontractor coming in from out of town. And that was the completion of our first full static load test on one of our piles. It's a 30-inch diameter shaft, and that frame helped us test that pile to the tune of 1.9 million pounds of load that we put on that pile head with a jack. That test was passed successfully, and we started production drill shaft installation at the end of July, and it is ongoing. There'll be about 300 of them that we have to put in across the job site for our building foundations. Next slide. There we go. All right. The other big thing that's important in the last quarter was the beginning of steel fabrication. Our quality team with WMATA's made a visit to the fabricator in South Carolina in June. You can see a picture inside of the shop there at the top right. And they have started fabricating steel in earnest for in preparation of erecting steel next spring. And the pile of steel on the bottom right is just a small fraction of the 10,000 tons of structural steel that will make up our new building frame that has to be fabricated. Next slide. So from the standpoint of the battery electric bus design update, Amy will be giving a more detailed update on the larger program shortly, but we did complete the design reviews with WMATA of the 40% level of effort. WMATA also in the last quarter completed the finalization of the design criteria updates to their standards specific to battery electric bus. We have completed an initial fire hazard analysis, and that remains under review by the WMATA team. And we continue to work closely with biweekly meetings with PEPCO as they work to identify and design the new routing for the services that will feed the battery electric buses at Northern. And right now, all of that looks like it will be run underground from their Fort Slocum substation, which is located to the north of us. Next slide. So as we look ahead through the balance of this quarter and towards the end of the year, the demolition operations will wrap up. The supportive excavation in concert with mass excavation, they go hand in hand. As we push there, we hit a milestone last week of we hit the 50% complete state on the bulk excavation on the site. We will continue drill shaft excavations through the quarter, steel fabrication, and in the month of September, we will start the beginning of our first new structural concrete on top of some of those early foundation elements. Next slide. We've remained busy with our agency partners, with the District Department of Buildings, the former DCRA. Our building permit has just wrapped up our round 2 reviews. We have 11 of 13 departments have signed off, and we have only a few outstanding questions to close before we get our final major building permit. With Washington Gas, we have completed the coordination of the new low-pressure service and received their final design plans in the past week. That will allow us to make sure those are coordinated with other planned work on the job. With DDOT, our major activity at present is just supporting their periodic MOT inspections around the property. And with DC Water, since we last met, we have finally received all the approvals for our new work. And with PEPCO, we're working on finalizing the installation of our temporary service for construction off of 14th Street that will work in addition to the one we have on Arkansas that principally supports our field offices. We do maintain through that same biweekly meeting the ongoing coordination of finalizing the design for the main building non-BEB service, as well as a separate service that will be brought in for the retail spaces. And with DEOE, I will not steal any of Jim's thunder tonight. He will be speaking more extensively, and we do have one or more DEOE reps on the call with us tonight, too. Next slide. Pre-construction surveys. Each time I visit with you, I remind everybody to take advantage of this opportunity. We would certainly like to see more response than we have to date, but all the ones that have been requested have been completed. The contacts remain the same for either a phone number or an email. The property owner of record does receive a copy of that survey, and it just helps you document the conditions before we started. In the event there is a claim in the future, that you have just help the processing of that claim. And as we have noted previously, this survey is informed by the Department of Buildings and FTA guidelines, and is, next slide, eligible for all those properties that are within 200 feet of the property line. So that's that gray overlay. So if your property falls inside of, any portion of your property falls inside that gray shadow, your property is eligible. And the contact information, again, remains on many of our presentations from the past several quarters. Next slide. So the Metropolitan Transit Police Department substation, there's been a number of questions about these. So it is located in the southwest corner of the site where 14th and Buchanan are. The area covered by the red circle is the general space that will be occupied by Captain McKinney's team. They have a total of 3,890 square feet of space allocated. Inside of that, there are 13 officer workstation cubicle type spaces. There are 2 enclosed offices for sergeants. There is a break room for the officers. They have a firearm maintenance room. They have a roll call / conference room. They have a small locker area for both men and women officers. They have a unisex restroom, and they have an IT communication closet for their services and systems. And I think at this point it brings us up to a Q&A break.
Yeah, and I would just like to, thank you. And again, I'm Captain McKinney. And I would just like to reiterate that for this space, this is going to be an administrative function only. There will be specifically geared for us to do training with our bus operators, and we will not have any officers that will be permanently assigned to this location. So I just wanted to go ahead and piggyback on this slide.
Thank you. So we have about 15 questions online. Just a little bit of housekeeping on those questions. There are a few questions regarding monitoring water and noise. Those will be answered in the next section, which is the environmental section. So I think there are about 3 questions there. But beyond that, I think we're going to see if there are any questions in the room, and then we'll go to the other questions online. Any questions in the room? Mr. Bridgewater, how are you? You got it. Thank you.
Yes, question. As asbestos, how much was taken out of the building? Where was the asbestos located in the building?
Yeah, so the asbestos was located in the former administrative offices, so it was on the street level. You know where the ramp where the employees went up onto the parking deck? That end of the building right there, it was only under a portion of the floor tile. There was no other asbestos around pipes or in caulking or glazing, so it was just under the floor tile. So what they did is they created what's called a negative pressure environment to make sure that the air was pushing in, and then properly trained crews with the protective equipment went in and collected, secured, bagged, double wrapped, and then disposed at a licensed facility. It was then put in drums, and then it was transported off the site in drums to a disposal facility that's licensed for asbestos.
So there was no asbestos in any other part of the building?
No, if you may recall, the vast majority of the building had gone through a major renovation in the late 80s and early 90s, and so most of it was reconstructed. So I can't say whether any asbestos was managed at that time. I suspect it was, but the building that we inherited in 2019 was thoroughly surveyed, and we did not find it other than in that location.
In the tile?
It
Not
was,
near
it was
the
in, it was,
pipes
it was
or in the
underneath the
ceiling?
floor tile. It was the glue that held the floor tile to the concrete floor is where the actual asbestos was present, not in the floor tile itself.
So the last time it was checked was in the 80s or the 90s?
The building was surveyed, I believe, Jim, in the early 2000s, because we did have some reports from that time frame. And then, like I said, it was resurveyed in 2019 and early 2020 by our environmental team.
Following up on that, yes, Wamanda did do a building survey. I don't have the dates or details here. I'll have to provide that at a later date.
I would like to have a copy of that, because a lot of building, we were always told that any building 25 years old would have asbestos in it, including homes. So you went from early 80s, perhaps 90s, to 2019. You last did the survey of the building. So during that time period, you had asbestos, and you said it was in the tile. Is there a tile all through the building?
No, sir. The tile was limited to the administrative areas. And again, it was only a portion of the tile. All of the tile was tested. Some of it had been replaced at some period of time, and not all of it had asbestos-containing material in the adhesives.
Mr. Bridgewater, what I think I hear you saying though is understanding that most buildings had asbestos. You're looking for when would the asbestos been removed if it wasn't there when they started in 2019. And that's the documentation you're looking for. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And more information as to where in the building. If we're assuming that there's tile in the building, or you're walking on cement, or what other aspect of the building that didn't have tile. I know the room that was designated for community activity had tile in it, correct?
I'm unfamiliar where the community previously met in the building, sir.
I'm aware that an asbestos remediation effort was done. I don't have the details here to brief you, and I'm just going to have to leave it at that. If you need that information, we're going to have to provide it at a later meeting.
Well,
Phil and the Clark team did a survey of the building to identify asbestos locations. They identified one location when they took control of the building. That area was remediated according to DOE standards. And if for efforts before that, we're just going to have to pull that information together to present.
yeah, I would like to have that information.
I understand.
Going all the way back into the 80s and beyond.
I understand.
I believe there's an online for Mr. Herzberg. Are you reading it, or are we gonna have him come off? Okay, if you could read the first.
So this question is, can you coordinate rodent control beyond your borders with DC Gov? Rats out of the site don't care about our boundaries.
Could you restate the question? I'm not sure I understood it. We'll start with that.
Sure. Can you coordinate rodent control beyond your borders with DC government? The rats out of the site don't care about the borders.
So what I believe that they're talking about is, Jim, is that it was mentioned what was happening with regard to rodent mitigation. And he's asking, can coordination happen to include beyond the boundary?
I think we can talk with DOE and other district representatives about that. But the rules would apply to our activities on the site, and that's what we would be focusing on.
All right, in the room?
I'll start with the rodent control piece. This is August. We addressed the rodent control to WMATA right after Channel 5 did a story on a rat problem in 16th Street Heights, and that was in April. So whatever you've done recently or whatever you did prior to April, it was ineffective. So whatever we're being told now, it's too late. The guys have already left. You've disturbed their nest, 114 years worth of nests. So Northern Bus Barn Neighbors is not accepting these excuses that we are being given. Secondly, with respect to Mr. Bridgewater's question, it is hard for me to fathom that a building that is 113 years old only had asbestos under some tile where I used to work. I'm familiar with that building. I know where it is. And it's an insult to my intelligence to be told that a 113-year-old building does not have more asbestos in it other than what's in the tile. There was no asbestos removal in that building anytime during the 80s and 90s unless there was not a requirement that the building be covered. My understanding, when asbestos is removed, the entire facility needs to be covered. That wasn't done. With respect to the street sweep, it's too little too late. We addressed this issue a couple of months ago. We also have pictures showing the dirty, muddy streets. And it's a little unusual to me to know now that DC WASA just provided you, I guess, the meters that were needed in order to do this cleaning, which begs the question, what was being used in December and January and February and March during the teardown, when there was supposed to be water control with respect to the dust, if these meters just came in?
Can I clarify that one while
Sure.
you're at there? So we had what are called hydrant permits from the day demolition started, and we drew water from fire hydrants through metered permits, and we had continuous dust management for demolition from day one.
So since we're pausing, I also want to clarify, so you're saying buildings have to be covered for asbestos mitigation?
That's my understanding.
But did asbestos mitigation happen in the building?
Yes, it did, and the whole building doesn't need to be covered. The area of the building actively being remediated needs to be secured in a positive pressure environment.
But
which
for
we did.
clarity, I'm not speaking of what they did. I'm speaking of them saying that there was some asbestos removal prior to this demolition.
Yeah, that's what he's saying, prior to.
But he's not familiar with that.
Okay.
He's not familiar with that time frame because none of them were working there.
So, okay, so what I committed to Mr. Bridgewater and I'll commit to you is there is a report around it. That's what I heard. There's a report around it. That's what I heard him say. So we'll make sure, I think that will clarify if mitigation happened.
Donzel, what I want to tell this community and tell the people that are sitting up here on this dais, this is an entity, that is WMATA, that we could never trust. And to think that now, after all this time, and I'm talking decades, of not being able to trust someone, it's hard for me to be able to accept anything that comes from them, particularly when we know as a community, we have not gotten the support from our own district government.
So I appreciate that you are distrustful and exhausted. And I want to make sure for those who requested the information regarding the report around previous asbestos removal, that's gotten. So I'm, in the current state of distrust, the current state of exhaustion, I know there are people who ask questions, including you, and my desire is always to continue to make sure you get the
Well,
answer.
here's what I would ask that you do. Don't interrupt me, because I'm not finished with this.
I'm not,
I have advised this group, and I advised your organization that this meeting for me was going to be contentious, because I'm tired of this. I'm tired of these interruptions, somebody trying to put words in my mouth, interpreting what it is that I'm saying to the Metropolitan Transit Police Department. It is hard for me to imagine that this is an administrative place only when I'm also hearing that you've got male and female lockers. For what? That it doesn't seem to be necessary. The community is not welcoming of this transit department. It has a long history, quite a long history, particularly since the advent of the subway station, of being, I can't even think of the right words right now. You all have a history of harassing and arresting young Black children. I'm concerned that this community is getting an administrative substation where there's going to be some kind of training going on between your organization and the drivers that is not compatible with our community. Western is not getting a substation. We are. Yet Western has a subway right next door to where they're going to be located. Your organization, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you all are currently being sued by your own women, Black women in particular, for discrimination. I don't want that nonsense up here. The community doesn't. It's not just me. When we mention this to the community and they find out that there's going to be a police substation here, when you already have an operation over by Fort Totten, I don't know if that's administrative or not, but I know there's one over there. We just don't understand why it is that this community has to be burdened with the Transit Police Department, particularly with its reputation. No one else has to deal with it. Finally, I'm going to say this. What we're experiencing in Northern compared to the other bus barns in this city is violating the city's racial equity component. We are not getting at Northern what Western is getting.
when you say you're not getting, help me understand what you're not
Give you two examples. When we had our first meeting here, not here, I'm sorry. The first meetings that we had, some were held in the community room of 4D, some were held at the community room at WMATA. There were close to a dozen people that presented to this community, a dozen. I went to Weston's garage meeting, their first meeting. There were 2. We get 12. It doesn't make sense to me that I walk into the Weston garage and the 2 people that are there are the commercial real estate company telling the community that they're going to get housing and mixed-use retail. And I quote from this group, Mr. Ugdar, it's been a garage for 100 years. It's going to be one for 100 more. Now, for those that may not be familiar, 71 to 70, according to district records, 71 to 72% of the people in Ward 3 near Weston's garage are white. 49% of the people in the 16th Street Heights area, not just Ward 4, in the community where Northern is located, 49% African American. So if this is not race, someone needs to tell me what it is.
Okay.
I will yield to this. because it wasn't my intent to dominate the meeting, but I warned you all. I sent emails out to every single one of you, and I told you what this meeting was going to be like. I purposely did not attend the meeting, the pre-meeting, because I already knew what it was going to be, and you all are demonstrating this to us right now. All the emails I sent about the street sweeping, the pictures that I sent about the dirty, muddy streets, the complaints that we sent about having the transit police department in our community. All of those things I addressed. The rats we addressed months ago. All you all are doing now is just placating us, treating us like children. But yet you want to tell us how we need to act when we come into this meeting. Playing on my intelligence, playing on this community's intelligence is an insult. It is an insult for you all to keep coming back here with this same pablum, you know, like I'm a baby that I've got a nurse on your breast. This is not what any of us expected.
So what did you expect?
I expect that we should get what it is the city said it approved we have at this site.
What did they approve?
In 2012,
I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page.
the 14th, the Central 14th Street Revitalization Plan, which was approved by the City Council in December of 2012,
Okay.
called for the the reopening of Decatur Street to create a promenade. I think they call it a promenade where you only have pedestrians, no vehicles. They approved mixed-use retail. They approved housing, not only on the site, but going down Iowa Avenue and wrapping around onto Arkansas.
Okay.
That's what we want to see. With the plan that the city approved, that this community got together and said this after what, 18 meetings? And said this is what it wanted. But our response has been, and I repeat the quote, Mr. Ugda, it's been a garage for 100 years, and we're building it for 100 more. I apologize for anyone that I have insulted.
All right. We have online question. I know that you want to respond.
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah. Again, thank you for your questions and comments. So to address a couple of things that you mentioned, the training aspect. One of the things that we are continuously looking to do is improve our bus operators, making sure that they're safe. And one of those ways is hosting weekly bus operator assault reduction classes. This location gives us a magnificent location to meet with our operators more readily. We can address, de-escalation. We can give them different tools that we can work with to make sure that they are in our community providing great service while also they're being safe. When it comes to the showers, it is imperative, because we are a 24-hour operation, that we have locations that can be, for emergency use only. In the event that someone gets hurt, harmed, their uniform gets messed up. Again, as I stated, this location is not operations. This is strictly for administrative functions, administrative capacities. One of the things that you spoke on when it comes to the youth, predominantly young Black kids in our community, I would like to bring awareness that we have, started a community service bureau. That team has been going on for a couple years now, and they are doing a tremendous job in our community, all over the city, throughout the northern NCR, Northern Capital Region. They host a monthly youth advisory council meeting that is open to all students throughout this area, throughout this region. That meeting is held at our headquarters down at 307th Street Southwest. And they are going to all schools. They're connecting with administrators throughout this region. So they are doing a tremendous job of trying to bridge the gap. We're hosting a back to school event August 19th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at our Fort Todd Metro Station. That is open to all communities. We are doing our part to make sure that we are truly bridging the gap, making sure that we are, again, being heard. And we definitely, at least myself, we hear you as it relates to the things that you have been impacted by, the trauma that you witnessed. So again, I want to just make it clear that we are doing our part to make sure that we are providing you all the service that we can, the best that we can.
All right, I think we have online, and then, sir, I'll come to you. All right.
I have two quick other responses. Just a clarification, the pest management program we have in place today is identical to what we had prior to the start of demolition. So that's just a clarification point. And the other one for you was the street sweeping. We believe we have upped our game, and it is in direct response to those complaints. We're attempting to be responsive. We are being much more aggressive in monitoring what our subcontractors are doing and that they're meeting their contract requirements to keep those local streets clean.
My only concern, this reminds me of my middle school, junior high school days, where I'm being treated as if I'm a hall monitor. It should not be up to the community to keep bringing these same things to the attention of this reconstruction team, when I would expect after all this time, particularly coming from Clark, because I see the projects that you all have all over the Washington metropolitan area. So I just can't imagine that we're the only ones that's being treated this way. And right here in the district, isn't Clark doing construction on McMillan Reservoir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I didn't see them I drive by there frequently. I didn't see them with no mud issues. And that place ain't nothing but mud. At least at one time, that's all it was. Some of this, I'm just having a real hard time trying to accept as being, as folk being transparent with us. As if the only way that you all are going to do anything is when we jump up and down and act like just wild jabangs. And then all of a sudden, everybody's going to come here and act like, well, we done upped our game. It's too late. It's too late. Clark has been doing this for I don't know how long. In fact, I go back so far, I know when it was George Hyman. It wasn't Clark. I remember Frank B. Joy and George Hyman and all those groups before they got where they are. This is.
That's all right. Catch your breath. I know you'll be back. It's all right. Alexis, question.
So we have, my first question here is, can you share how many water monitoring wells are currently in use and how many have yet to be installed?
Let's do that in the environmental. So we'll come back to that one.
All right. Will Saturday work be ongoing?
Yes.
Let's get through a couple of those. I know we have some time in the room.
All right. And are you able to share any of the initial fire hazardous analysis with respect to choice of battery and DC fire review?
Let's say that for the battery electric program.
Okay. And can you give us more specifics on what prior protocol was and what the new increased protocol in terms of dust mitigation will be?
So what were you doing previously with dust mitigation, and now how has it changed?
As the demolition operations wind down, those have used the same DEOE guided mitigation measures. And what we have to watch for now is, as we get the excavation completed, is making sure that we keep those inactive work areas covered with a suitable cover to help minimize any wind blowing dust. But during the excavation, the majority of the soil that we're encountering on site right now is moist enough that it doesn't produce dust during loading operations. But we do have to watch tracking. So we continue to do the wetting with the water buffalo and stuff on the hauling inside of the job site.
Sir, I'm gonna let you get your question, then I'll go back to online.
Good evening, everybody. Al Swells, Ward 4 residents, also the president of the Black Business Task Force. First of all, I want to commend my brother over here for, standing up and fighting for the community. I've been into a number of meetings with Secretary Buttigieg where he talks about how Department of Transportation has come into the Black community and basically just railroaded over top of them. And now they are going to pay some back money to those folks that's been treated unfairly in the Black community. So his fight is not just a fight that he thought of right now. This is a fight that's been going on since the Civil Rights Movement. We know about all the incidents that have gone on. I think the first one that he talks about is the one in New Orleans, where they just took the people's land and just drove a highway right between them and didn't give the people any money for their land, anything.
It's Harlan Bartholomew and the highway.
Yeah, right. Yes. So, but my question is, because I haven't been here and I haven't heard of any statistics, did the Department of Transportation come up with which program and what are the numbers on either the DBE program or I know in the Metro they have also an MBE program. I have not heard of any of the numbers. And the second question, part of that question would be, I heard demonstration. How much money has actually been spent on demolition and how much money has actually been donated to either small business or CBEs or MBEs or DBEs?
So just to make sure I have your question, what are the DBE, CBE numbers for the project percentage-wise? Okay, so which program?
Yeah, which program?
What's the numbers?
What's the numbers?
How much of the demolition constructions has been spent, and of that, how much has been allocated to those DBE, CBE businesses?
All right, so we're working under WMATA's DBE program, so the participating firms have to be registered in that. Our construction phase has a 20% goal, and we have identified scopes of work to the tune of over $80 million for those minority partners. The demolition contractor, the prime, is not a DBE, but nearly 100% of his trucking support for the hauling is being performed by DBE trucking companies working with him. From the standpoint of the exact dollar value of that trucking or the demolition specific, I do not have the numbers in front of me tonight to answer that question, but we could certainly give those to you in the follow-up.
And I'd like to add, we are on target to meet that 20%.
But that is outstanding, is that last part, which is if 100% is the trucking, I'm still wanting to know what that represents as far as. So we'll make sure we follow up to get you
We
that
can follow
answer.
up on that.
So we will do that. All right, online, Alexis, do we have?
I have questions about noise and whatnot, and that we can do it.
Yeah, I think there was one about parking from Commissioner Ferris.
Did you want me to?
Yes. Commissioner Ferris, you're off mute. Did you want to say your question out loud?
Oh, no, I was asking if you wanted me to.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm hearing from a lot of constituents that there's problems with people parking on residential streets, WMATA drivers, a variety of folks that are associated with WMATA or with the construction site. And it is creating problems for people, both for residences and for businesses. Is there something that seems like, could there be parking at Carter Barron and a shuttle? Is there something that could be done to just kind of smoothly address that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We do have online two WMATA representative, Ms. Yvonne Manfra. She's the Director of Services of Bus Transportation, and Ms. Sharon James, Superintendent for Western Bus Garage. If they can come up with you, they can address that question, since this is not a project delivery question.
Yeah, this is Yvonne Manfra speaking. So we have parking at the Western Bus Garage facility for our bus operators, and they are encouraged to park there and then take the bus down to meet the reliefs at Colorado and 14th. We have been encouraging that. We have been working with the union to encourage that. And Ms. James has been out at Colorado and 14th meeting with the operators to continue to encourage the use of the parking facility here and the buses to connect down to the relief points at 14th and Colorado.
So I think, right, so immediately the question becomes encouraging versus enforcement capability. So I don't know if she spoke to, I know she said they could be encouraged. I don't know what the
encouraged,
capacity is around beyond encouraged to enforce.
And it's not just Western. These drivers are coming from Montgomery County. I mean, I see them every day. That's what? No, there's not, sir. There is not. Do you want to see some pictures that I have of $24?
So,
No, no, sir. This is before them. This is before them. I live at 14th and Jefferson. I own a business at 14th and Jefferson. I'm right next to the turnaround at 14th and Colorado. I see this every single day. I'm taking photos every single day. I can go back and look at my cameras and show you that these are bus drivers getting out of these cars. There's a problem, and I know that there's a problem. You all, they know that there's a problem. They're aware of it. I've made them aware of it. I've sent them pictures. Yeah, emails.
Correct, and we respond.
I've sent pictures with those emails.
so I think Mr. Uga is not them, as the gentleman is saying that the scale is different. So I don't want his assertion to be put.
Here's what I'm saying. Whenever Northern Division had work to do for the garage prior to this demolition, they always made arrangements so that there was no encouragement. Their drivers were told to park on the P2 level of the DC USA Mall. Well, I spent $1 million to rent that space. And I understand that Clark, I don't know how much space Clark has, but Clark has space down there for their employees. I don't understand why these people have to be encouraged.
Hey man, stop hijacking the meeting. I understand you have concerns, but there are a lot of things going on, and if everyone has concerns that they'd like to have addressed. I know that you said that you didn't want to hijack the meeting. Please stop hijacking the meeting.
Yeah, well, you don't have the problems I have.
So,
I live right here, man. I live on 14th and Crittenden.
14th and Crittenden, we're talking about parking at 14th and Jefferson.
so the person who was online, and for the individuals in the room, we do want to make sure that there are questions that the team can actually answer. So we appreciate that there are differences of opinion around the issues, but we want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to have their issues heard. So. So what I heard, sir, what did you started with, the mic behind you, the microphone's behind you.
Starting in the 1970s, 14th and Kennedy was a relief point for bus drivers, and they've always parked there until Montgomery Division opened, And then those lines were transferred to Western and to Montgomery, so they didn't park there any longer. But now on a temporary basis, because they've rerouted those runs, because Northern is closed, probably 5 or 6 drivers park there on their breaks every day. Now, there's 2 parking places right in front of his business, and yes, they are often taken up by people. But there's, if you look, I can just show you the pictures, there's 10 or 15 parking spaces across the street, which are vacant. No one's parking there, basically. So it's not like they've created a parking problem in the area. I just, you know, we should, personally, I'm really appreciative that Northern's being rebuilt, that it's going to provide us with better public transportation in the area, and that, yes, there are some inconveniences associated with that. But at the end of the day, there's been a tremendous reduction in pollution and whatnot in our region because of the improvement of public transportation in that area. So we got up at a little, very, very small inconveniences for 2 or 3 years to accomplish this much broader goal. And that's the way we should look at it.
Thank you.
I mean, I've lived in that area for 40 years. I never had a problem like this.
So, and you have a problem with the parking? I'm just trying to make sure we. Oh, okay, right. So I mean, on residents, I understand that. So.
Don't touch me. I got pictures right here showing Metro drivers parked in the neighborhood.
So hold on, before we get to the battle of the pictures, I promise you, you both will have opportunity to share the pictures at the end of the meeting. What I do hear is there are parking, the extent of the, I got you. What both of you heard you say is the parking spaces in front of his home and that business are occupied. There are other parking spaces that are also available, right? So that is the perspective. I don't think those are 2 things that can't be true, right? So that's the part that where we are. He's saying the parking spaces.
I got pictures that show drivers parked all along the 5400 block and the 1300 block.
Yeah, so anyone who captures a moment in time for the picture will show with that picture. So Mr. Oakdale, like I said, you know, I'm always better on weekends. I know that Commissioner Ferris was actually the one who was asking the question. So I want to make sure she gets her question out and we get an answer. And then we're going to actually get to Jim and the environmental, and then we're going to return to the extra questions that we have. But I do want to get to other sections so that we can get beyond just the project update. Commissioner Ferris, did you have an addition to your question?
Oh, my only add-on would be, and Ms. Fossey put it in the chat as well, that a bus all the way from Western it's not super convenient for the drivers. And there are people that probably, you know, I run late sometimes. Maybe I don't have time to budget an extra 45 minutes to go way up there, wait for the bus, come down here. If we could offer them something that's a little bit more convenient, closer to home. Like I said, I mean, Carter Barron's right there. There's a ton of parking. If something could be worked out there, perhaps.
Right, so encouragement beyond a 40-minute bus ride is something that you're looking for. Thank you. So I know there are additional questions. We're going to hold those. We're going to get into the environmental part, and then we're going to open up to other questions.
Slide, please. Good evening. Slide, please. I'm going to spend a few moments talking about activities on environmental remediation since the June meeting, and then I'll turn to dust monitoring and air or vibration and noise monitoring activities. We've continued our discussions with the Department of Energy and Environment representatives. That has included a field visit to the site. DOE reps came out to the site and we talked about what was going on and our understanding of the site. Last week we had a meeting with DOE representatives with the goal of developing a unified approach. The site is being regulated under both the underground storage tank regulations and under the land remediation regulations. And what we're trying to do is get to a single common approach to deal with both sets of contaminants. Since our last meeting, we did receive a letter from DOEE documenting closure of underground storage tanks. This is the administrative closure documenting that we pulled the tanks out of the ground. This does not affect the remediation. The remediation activities will still continue for that. We developed and submitted a baseline risk assessment to DOEE last week. We await comments from them. They've just gotten it, so they're going to have to work through that. Once we get their comments, we'll finalize the baseline risk assessment, and that will give us a sense of the risk posed by contaminants at the site. Finally, we've received formal direction from the land remediation section about investigation measures that need to take place, and a number of the items that I brief on today are based on that letter. Slide, please. By way of background, groundwater flow is flowing to the southeast from the site, so it's flowing towards Arkansas Avenue. Slide, please. And likewise, the bedrock surface is tilted towards Arkansas Avenue as well. And contaminants that are heavier than water will go to the bottom of the aquifer and tend to roll along the top of the aquifer. Slide, please. One of the things we've done is we've continued our file research, and we located a file of Northern Bus Garage. This photo dates to approximately 1984. Of note, you can see in the intersection near 14th and Buchanan, the old garage facility where a number of the tanks previously existed. So this is before WMATA took control of the area near the intersection of 14th and Buchanan. Slide, please. We've also gone in and found the Department of Energy and Environment directive letter that applied to those tanks, where we disclosed to DOE that the tanks were present and removed them. We're working to find the full file on that, but we have been able to start to document our past efforts towards remediation. That doesn't change what we have to do, but it informs our approach and our understanding of the site. Slide, please. So I'm going to talk first about investigation tasks, and then I'm going to turn and talk about remediation tasks. DOE has asked us to prepare a comprehensive work plan to address investigation of the site, and this will address both the UST and the land remediation tasks, and it will integrate the work that we've already done. Among those is an item DOE has asked us to install 7 additional wells. I'll have a graphic on that in a moment. Based on our discussion last week, we will develop and submit to DOEE an interim corrective action plan. The idea there is to address activities on the site associated with the soil. This will not address the activities associated with groundwater. That will be covered under a separate deliverable. We will install 7 wells to better understand and delineate groundwater as it leaves the site and what kinds of contamination is leaving the site. DOE has asked us to sample wells quarterly. They've asked us to submit a comprehensive site assessment, supplemental site assessment report. We've already submitted one that was focused primarily on the underground storage tank issues. This follow-on will involve an integrated assessment of both soil and groundwater and underground storage tanks and the other contaminants that might be present. Once that's done, we'll submit a final cap, which will address both the soil and the groundwater issues. Slide, please. One of the things that they asked us to do as part of our effort was collect samples from across the site. Samples will be collected on a 100-foot rectangular grid, and in some areas we will do focused sampling. These activities will be reviewed by DOEE. Samples will be analyzed for target compound list, volatile organic compounds, semi-volatile organic compounds, pesticides and PCBs, and target analyte list metals. We have assured DOEE that none of the contaminated soil will be used for backfill. This is a cut job, which means that soil, any soil that we pick up is leaving the site. And Phil and his team will characterize the soil so that it gets to the right disposal facility or treatment facility. But none of the contaminated soil that we pick up will remain on site. DOE asked us to assure us that our excavation would remain above the groundwater table elevation. Their concern there, and I'm speaking for them, but their concern was that we wouldn't smear the contaminants in the groundwater aquifer. So, but all of our excavation work will be above the groundwater table. Slide, please. So this was our first proposal to DOE. This has 19 samples. We've done some, sharpened our pencils, and it looks like the total number of samples that we'll collect will be above 30, and that grid will be included in our interim corrective action plan. Slide, please. Now I'm going to turn to the remediation activities for the site. These should look familiar. We've presented them previously. We will remove all underground structures and storage vessels, all the pipes and all the connecting functions. Impacted soil will be excavated and sent off-site for disposal, especially in the areas of petroleum impacted soil and other areas of impacted soil as we encounter them. Free-phase petroleum product, that is petroleum that's floating on top of the groundwater aquifer, will be pumped out and put into a Baker tank and then shipped off-site for disposal in an appropriate treatment facility. If we encounter dense, non-aqueous phase liquids, so if there happen to be chlorinated solvents present in a free phase, we will pump those out and likewise send them off-site for treatment and disposal. We don't believe that we're going to find that based on the concentrations of chlorinated solvents that we've seen so far. And our investigations, we've looked in the places where we think we would find those kinds of materials. But if we do find DNAPL, dense non-aqueous phase liquids, chlorinated solvents, we will pump those out and take those off-site. DOE has asked us to install sentinel wells and complete monitoring and then do groundwater remediation as necessary. Slide, please. This is the graphic that we submitted to DOE regarding the location of monitoring wells, and we will confirm these locations. But the idea is DOE was concerned about us getting control and a better understanding of groundwater contamination along Buchanan and along Arkansas, and this would be the down gradient direction from the site. We continue to pursue that effort. Slide, please. All right, I'm going to set down environmental remediation for a moment and turn to dust monitoring and noise and vibration activities. Earlier today, we posted the June 2023 dust monitoring, noise, and vibration report, and that's available on the Northern Bus Garage website. We are reviewing the July 2023 report, and that will be posted as soon as we've completed our quality reviews there. I've got graphics that show this, but we've got 3 dust monitoring points that are located on site. We've set some internal thresholds that, based on our understanding of regional standards, that for dust monitoring exceedances. We did identify some exceedances in the period June 7th through June 9th, and again on June 29th. You may recall the Canadian wildfires and the smoke in the area in the early part of June. And so the exceedances that we see during the June 7th through June 9th timeframe are an indication that we were seeing the same thing in our equipment. The June 29th exceedance was a regional event, which is to say there was an issue with air quality in the entire region, and our instruments detected that as well. We have 5 noise monitors, and they're co-located with 5 vibration monitors. For the noise monitoring, we have multiple exceedances. We're seeing some challenges in the data here. First, we're unable to distinguish site-related noise from non-site-related noise. And this is pointed out somewhat acutely. We're seeing multiple exceedances after hours and on the weekends. In other words, the regional noise levels are above regulation, and our microphones are picking that up. For that, we're going to continue to consult with DOE and representatives of district government about how to manage that so we get good quality data that reflects what we are doing. We're seeing exceedances during the day, we're seeing exceedances at night, and it's a challenge for us when we look at the data, but there it is. Vibration monitors, we had one exceedance, and after we looked at it, we determined that it was a faulty sensor. That is to say, the equipment was not working properly, but otherwise we've not had any exceedances. Slide, please. This slide shows the location of the 3 dust monitors that are present on site. The first monitor is located near the intersection of Iowa and Decatur. The second monitor is located near the intersection of Arkansas and Buchanan. And the third monitor is located mid-block on 14th Street. Slide, please. This slide then shows the location of the noise and vibration meters. We have 3 noise vibration meters located along 14th Street. We have 1 located along Decatur Street, close to the intersection with Iowa. And the 5th monitoring device is located mid-block between Arkansas Avenue, on Arkansas Avenue between Buchanan and Iowa. All right, Donzel, I think that gets to the point for Q&A.
I know we had a hand raised online, so if we can get that unmuted, and then Mr. Bridgewater, I will come to you afterwards. The online person is ready?
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. In the small group meeting, I had asked about, is it possible to get some kind of ongoing TikTok-like account that lets us know when there's going to be drilling, or the air monitors are put out, or you've cleaned the site because of dust, so that the community is kept abreast of what's happening at the site? I have a lot of questions, so I would like to throw them all in there.
Okay.
And you touched on the air monitors, noting, as they did in the last meeting, that they had, I guess, confusing results due to the wildfires, the Canadian wildfires. But I mean, that was just a week's worth of time. We've had months to see what the air monitors have said about our community. And it seems like you have only 3 when there needs to be a little more for that size of a project. We'd like to get the readings, and how do we get the current readings? Whether they're high or low, we deserve to know what those readings are. And can we get a meeting that just covers the environment? Because there's so many questions, environmental questions, that we need answered, and we need DOEE present. We need some government agencies present at these meetings. You, WMATA and Clark constantly refer to DDOE or DOEE, water, all kinds of things, but the actual government representatives are not here in these meetings. We need them here. We need answers from our government, not just from WMATA and the contractors. Can we get a meeting with our government agencies, all of them, not just DOEE, but water, PEPCO, all of them, that just covers the buses, the environmental aspects, the big items that affect our quality of life here in the community? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nwanzi. So I want to make sure I have the list of questions that you asked. So the first one was continuous communication. We'd like to see that happen. The second was how long the air monitoring happening, if you can, I'm gonna just tie 2 of them together. Prior to the wildfire event, and now of course after, we like information on how long they've been monitoring, if there's a possibility for more monitors, even with the high registries of or information, can you get that information? If there can be a meeting for just environmental, and if DOEE can return to the meeting. Did I get all of those? I just want to make sure as both Maya and others are noting what your questions were.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I said TikTok, I meant Twitter. Yes, you captured everything, but not just the environmental, but also the bus and probably close to opening traffic would be key for the community as well. So again, just listening to what the community is saying and just addressing it head on. A lot of times in these meetings, the ball is kicked down the road. Like, oh, we'll find out from DOEE. Oh, we'll get confirmation from this. So we're waiting another 2 or 3 months to get an answer on some pretty serious things. So it would be nice, and we've heard in some of our subsequent meetings or prior meetings that we're not always getting responses. So yeah, we'd like some kind of Twitter that updates the community when WMATA does address some of these issues, which would be to your, I think it would help make these monthly or quarterly meetings go a lot smoother for you if you did have some other way of communicating with the community as a whole. So consistently, thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to touch on some of those?
I'll address some of the questions here. So in terms of DOE, they're actually online today with us. So they are present in this meeting. In terms of communication, we just issued our first community newsletter, which was issued on July 13, and we'll continue with those. And the idea is we'll give you a heads up of any impactful activities, so you know what's coming. We'll also send some email blasts if we need to for additional information during those between community newsletters and, of course, our meetings. I'm not sure about the question about open traffic. I didn't get that.
Maybe once we get closer, information around the traffic routes, how the buses will, I understood that to be how the buses will
we
be
can
entering
address
and
that.
leaving.
Yeah, we can address that in the community newsletters and the email blasts.
Okay. And of course, as you said, some of them can't be responded to today. She's also wanting a response sooner than the next quarterly meeting. And I just want to make sure we touch on that.
That's what we said, the email blast.
Perfect.
So please, yeah. So we do have a sign up on our website. I'll go over it. Please sign up. Make sure your neighbors do sign up, and we can that way communicate with you directly. You can also email. We have an email address that we can also communicate.
Okay. So this building closes at 8. We want to make sure the tech has an opportunity to break down. That's on me. I do apologize for the overrun in the last section. So what I'm going to do, I know I have at least 2 people who have questions in the room. I'm going to allow you both to ask your questions. We're going to get an answer. I'm going to ask Amy to hit the high points of the zero bus emissions, quickly go into, because I know we have a Q&A at the end of what's, the look ahead, and then we'll get those questions at that point. For those who are online, we're capturing all those questions. We always put the answers to those questions in our FAQ as we get them. And of course, we will work because online we know who's asking the questions to make sure not only to get you the response, to make sure that the community gets the responses to those questions as well. So I'm going to ask Mr. Bridgewater to ask your question. Then I'm going to ask Sir, the longtime resident of Uptown to ask his question. Say your last name for me. Swells, Mr. Swells ask his questions. We'll get answers, and then we'll keep going.
Okay. Ditto what the last caller said concerning a meeting more than an hour long and don't have to be here. It can be someplace else that doesn't close at 8 o'clock and you start at 7. Okay, 6, 7, wherever. The question, define soil sampling, contaminated soil, documented petrol impact, and groundwater contamination. Since DOE is on the line somewhere, there was a dust up at the last meeting concerning the uses of the word contamination. So what is your definition of contamination? you keep using it, and when we're, the last question is the old familiar, and we've talked about this at several meetings, the 200 yards aspect and what you're doing beyond the 200 yards. Because the uses of the word contamination, the uses of the petrol impact and groundwater contamination and impact all seems to say to me, all of that is not going on within 200 yards of your property.
All right, we're gonna get all the questions. I'm gonna let them get all the answers. Mr. Swells.
You mentioned that two things. First of all, is there in any of your categories zero tolerance, or is there a certain level that DOEE has given you in different sections of what you're talking about? Let's talk about, let's say, the leakage of the underground tanks. Is there a certain level, or is it you have to remove all of it? When we talk about asbestos, is there a zero tolerance, or is there a certain level? Noise, dust, all the other things that you're talking about, are there zero tolerance, or is there a certain level? And if it is, does the community know what those levels are?
Thank you, Mr. Swells. So you have Mr. Bridgewater and Mr. Swells.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, there are. First off, there are regulatory levels. For petroleum, we've been directed by DOEE to use what are called the Tier 1 remediation levels, and those are available online. For the non-petroleum compounds, we're using the industrial risk screening levels that are prescribed by EPA. There are also levels for noise, and we have set levels for vibration. The dust monitoring, the District of Columbia has a different approach to it, and this gets to how the site is managed. We don't have the defined levels that we might have with noise or with other media. To turn to your question, we're working with a model that we've got soil and groundwater beneath the site. When our predecessors got to the site, presumably it was clean. As a result of activities, the contaminants, chemicals from the site went into the environment. They went into either the soil or the groundwater. Some of those contaminants are still in free form. That is, you can still find some petroleum floating on top of the groundwater. We've told DOEE we will pull all of that petroleum out. There will be contaminated soil, which is not a free product, but it's still, if you send it to a chemical laboratory, we'll still have either petroleum or other kinds of chemicals present. We've been asked to go in and look and identify what those levels are. It is possible that there is enough, that some of the chemicals have gotten from the work area down to groundwater and started migrating in the groundwater. This first map that I put up showed the direction that groundwater is migrating, and DOE has asked us to put in 7 wells to better understand what contaminants are on the site and are leaving, what chemicals are on the site and are leaving the site. We will put together our best understanding and our approach for managing the soil in the interim corrective action plan that we expect to submit within the next couple of weeks or so to DOEE for its review and its concurrence. That will deal with the soil. The follow-on one will deal with groundwater once we have a complete understanding of what groundwater contamination is at the site. I tried to, I welcome your questions.
This is Apurva Patel from DOEE. I tried to put all the links for the screening levels, which we use to define the contaminants in the soil and groundwater. There are 2 kinds of screening levels, as Jim explained. One is for petroleum, which are available on the DOE's website. I have put the link in the chat. And for all other contaminants, which are in addition to petroleum, we use EPA's screening levels. And those also screening levels link, I have put it in the chat.
So unfortunately, you don't have the links in the chat here. We will make sure you get the links in the chat, and we will begin to update the FAQ to have the information that is shared. So we.
If you had a spreadsheet and then turned it into a PFW and sent it out to the community, I think that would solve a lot of the problems, because it sounds like people are not getting the information that they need, that you have. But they, because some of that stuff you talked about is so far over people's head, man. There's no way
that spreadsheet.
There's no way they're going.
But the thing is, so
I'm going to warn you, that spreadsheet that you're asking about is several pages long with 30 or 40 lines on each spreadsheet.
So there are two things, and we can. But what I hear you saying is, communication needs to happen in a way that it feels accessible to people. So we'll make sure that we get to the point that communication happens in a way that they can both. They can.
Yeah, the baseline risk assessment that I mentioned has your spreadsheets.
But it's just not only the info data, it's what you talked about, which were the standards that DOEE sets forth for people. So there are a couple of different things. Right. So we'll make sure that, ma'am, well, let me just her, and because I want to make sure people have an opportunity who haven't asked questions.
And I'll be quick. You mentioned the newsletter. I think making sure that it's plain language, and also, are you presenting that newsletter in languages other than English? And how do we get it? Because I don't see it on the website. So plain language, languages other than English, and how is it distributed?
Thank you. All right, so we can go to the next slide, but Mr. Bridgewater, I know you had another quick comment, a quick one.
There needs to be just a segment on environmental contamination. I just want your definition of contamination.
Okay. So, all right. Amy, next slide.
Thanks, everyone. Yes. So Northern Bus Garage is a key part of Metro's transition to a 100% zero-emission bus fleet. As we've talked about before, Metro is committed to reopening Northern as a 100% zero-emission bus facility. So the garage is being designed and built to accommodate a fleet of up to 150 battery electric buses. And when the facility reopens, only battery electric buses and no diesel or CNG buses will be operating out of Northern. So I'm actually just going to do this slide. So zero emission buses are important because they reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve air quality, they're quieter. So this year, Metro made commitments to accelerate our transition. Actually, can you just go back to the slide, please?
Go back, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk to the slide. Made commitments to transition to a full zero-emission bus fleet by 2042, which is 3 years earlier than our prior commitment. And as part of this new commitment, starting in 2027, Metro will only purchase zero-emission buses. So I just want to share a few exciting updates about our broader zero-emission bus transition with the group that's happened since our last public meeting. So first, in June, we took delivery of the first of our 12 battery electric buses that will operate out of Shepherd Parkway Bus Division in Southwest DC. And last week, we took delivery of our second bus, battery electric bus. So we're working to get these buses ready to start transporting customers. Also in June, the U.S. Federal Transit Administration awarded Metro a $104 million grant from the Lower No Emission Vehicle Program. It was the largest award from this grant program this year. So the grant funding will support Metro's zero-emission bus transition by helping us to buy more battery electric buses to be used in the region, as well as supporting the conversion of one of our other bus garages to support battery electric buses. And importantly, it also supports the workforce development and training needed to support the new buses and facilities. So I'll keep my update there for today and turn it over to Maya.
Thank you. Okay, so very quickly, what to expect for 2023 and beyond. In July, the end of July 2023, we started the permanent foundation, as you heard from Mr. Sheridan. For next year, 2024, the second quarter, we'll start the structural steel assembly. The plan for 2025, the second quarter, is to start the finishes. 2026, the third quarter, we'll start the acceptance testing. And our forecast completion is for 2027, the second quarter. That's the project final completion. This schedule is subject for change due to the BEB change, which we're working through it, and we'll let you know if there's any changes. Next slide. Okay, so one of the questions that you raised was, how do you get the newsletter? If you go to our website, wamada.com/Northern Bus Garage, there is a form where you can just put your information in there, and we'll have your email, and we'll continue to push information for you, newsletter and any updates. You can also reach out to us all the time at MCAP_Northern Bus Garage _reconstruction_project@wamada.com. We get those emails as they come, and we respond to those. Please check our website for additional information. We do have plans of revamping the website in the near future. And then, of course, we'll be communicating with you on the next community meeting. Below, we also have the various media sites for continuous updates. And I'm just rushing.
So, and for a couple of things, I know a person asked about the long-term schedule. I believe that was in one of the FAQs. For those who are here and couldn't copy and paste that, we have your email. If you note next to your email that you want that information or you would like to get the update, we can make sure that we add your email to it. And the next quarter meeting will be in the winter. Any questions in the room, and then we'll check to see if there are any online. There are a lot online. We're not going to get to them all. I apologize to those online. Questions in the room? Yes, ma'am.
We're going to big room.
Police substations, is there going to be room for community room where we could be?
There is a large community room.
Wonderful.
There will be a community room for those who didn't hear the question.
No, it's a fall. Every
Fall,
quarter.
sorry. I'm pushing I apologize. I misspoke.
It was a mistake on the slide.
I know that I misspoke. I'm pushing the months. It feels like it's fall already, so I apologize for that. The next one is fall. All right. Let's get one question online. I think there's someone already kind of trying to break through. 1 second, sir.
Okay, so online, we have a question that says, will soil sampling take place off-site given the issues with dust mitigation, dust migrating off-site that have been raised? Unfortunately, without baseline samples, which we did ask for, it could be difficult to determine what contaminants off-site previously existed and what might be related to the demolition. But from a health and safety standpoint for the neighbors, this is a really critical step.
All right. For fugitive dust, will you be able to test off-site?
That, we're going to have to consult with DOE about how it wants to. I understand the question. It's a good question. We need to consult with DOE about how it wants us to approach that issue. The challenge is we can take samples in public space. We can't necessarily take samples on private property. We can with appropriate permissions, but we need to bring DOE in to give guidance on how it wants us to approach that issue.
Sir, I know you had a question. I'll let you ask it, but I want to.
You know what? My name is Samson, and I'm one of the church there. I'm Orthodox church. There is a church, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church.
The Ethiopian church.
Yes. So it's just like in front of the church, they are doing the construction, and it's like the church is like a monastery, like a monastery. So it's not safe for the construction to continue. This is monasteries, it is like for the privacy of the church, and
So the monastery. So you're saying
like a monastery, the church is a congregation, you know.
Uh-huh.
So that's the prayer place, and then, you know, we should, the church should have privacy and also, you know, safety. So it's like, you know, the person said online, it's, you know, safe for the community and also the church. You know, at least should be the, you know, church, like market, stores, you know, grocery stores are built like 2 blocks away from church, like 16th Street churches and then 14th Street grocery stores, like 2 blocks. That's how it is designed, you know, for the safety. You know. It should be like that.
So that to ensure privacy of the church,
yes.
That's what the distance was. That
Yes,
others
it
had
should
done.
be at least 2 blocks, you know, like 2 blocks between like 16th and 14th Street, you see.
So,
it should be designed like that for, you know, spiritual services, you know.
right.
Church services.
So I appreciate what you're saying is, with regards to the design and construction, in order for the reverence of the church to be respected, there should be a greater distance. All right. So what we'll do is, I appreciate your comment. We will definitely follow up with you. I apologize, because we have to close our meeting now. But I will definitely, Nina right here, who you're going to get the mic from you, she'll get your contact information so that we can follow up as well. All right. So quickly, you all should have received it in the chat. I know there's some here. We have evaluations. Thank you all for joining us for this meeting. And of course, we will follow up to ensure that, you know, we answer the questions that have not been answered. Thank you all so much.